information discussed in this webinar is current as of the date noted and is for informational purposes only and does not intend to address the financial objectives, situation, or specific needs of any individual investor. Excuse me one second. Any information is for illustrative purposes only and is not intended to serve as investment, legal, or tax advice, since the availability and effectiveness of any strategy is dependent upon your individual facts and circumstances. Results will vary, and no suggestion is made about how any specific solution or strategy will perform in reality. And with that, Jason, I will turn things over to you to get things started.
All right, well, thank you, Ryan, and welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Ryan mentioned, this was an article that I wrote for the publication that we've been sponsored in, CNY C-Suite Magazine. And the concept here is to really kind of address some simple foundational concepts that we can all build into our financial lives. It does not alleviate the need or the complexity by any means. It doesn't alleviate the complexity that's out there in the financial world and its impact on us, and it doesn't alleviate the need for financial professionals by any means. Attorneys, accountants, insurance professionals, financial advisors, investment advisors are still very much needed. But these are things that we can simply build into our decision making and our approach on a regular basis that will build for us a good foundation. Now, some of these concepts may come across a little differently than what you're used to hearing in the media world with the financial talking heads out there on regular media or social media, because I do believe that some of the things that are talked about or professed to be the best approaches really aren't the best for everybody. I think about things like generic advice and how that might apply. But I do believe that there's a great deal of psychology built into our financial decision making, which does impact us as well and needs to be factored in. I also think about things that derail us from success in financial lives, and so the simpler the better, because these are concepts that we can follow and apply in a lot of areas where we make decisions in our financial lives. So I'm a big believer, as many of you've heard, that our financial well-being, our family's financial well-being is second only to our health, our physical health, our mental health. And there's some crossovers in the psychology and decision making that applies here that we'll talk about today. I mean, to put this in perspective, think about what's happening in a couple of months. We're going to move into the holiday season, and we move into a period of time where we get to the new year and New Year's resolutions. And what do we think about then? It's the common theme that I'm gonna exercise more, I'm gonna eat better. And why do we succeed or fail in those endeavors? There is some similarity to our success and failure in our financial endeavors. Part of it is complexity and how can we make things simpler. Some of it is psychology. I believe that discipline is a big reason for our success, but balance is a big reason for failure. Where a lot of people go into the new year with hopes of better health and better eating, only to be overdo it, if you will, and be overly strict and find themselves a month and a half, 2 months later, right back where they started. And I think we can build a lot of these concepts into our approach in our finances as well. And so we'll talk about that as we move through today. So we're going to present five different concepts and dig into them in a little bit of detail. When we move to the next slide, as I mentioned, this go back one for me, Ryan. Thank you. This is simply building a foundation. You've heard things like from others, create a budget and save more and spend less and invest. Those are certainly applicable pieces of advice and necessary in a lot of ways. But at times we need to lean on financial professionals to help us in those areas. And so I like to impress upon clients and folks I interact with to keep it simple and using the KISS method. And we often have heard it said differently, but one of my favorite ways that I heard of saying it is One of my favorite TV shows is Ted Lasso. It's an award-winning TV show. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. He says, keep it simple, smarty pants. And so we're going to try and do that today. And let's get into the first concept that I want to talk about and address the elephant in the room, which is debt, right? There is many people advising against debt, and doing so on a very simplistic level, avoid it. If you have it, pay it off. I think a little bit differently. I think of we should be using debt as an asset. Now that's a little bit counterintuitive because a debt is a liability and a liability is the opposite of an asset. But if we use smart debt and we use smart debt smartly, it can become an asset to us versus paying cash, right? If think about when we buy a home, one of the smartest debts that we can use is a mortgage. It's tax deductible. It is against a tangible, hopefully appreciating asset. And if we were to simply pay cash for that, we would run ourselves short on cash to use in other places. So using debt smartly to help create or maintain an emergency fund, a liquid emergency fund. If we play that scenario out, if we were to use all of our cash to buy a home and then something goes wrong with the home, we don't have any cash and we end up accessing bad debt or dumb debt, I call it, to make the house fixes, or maybe it's car fixes or something like that. So we'll get into definitions of smart debt versus dumb debt shortly, but this is why I think debt can be used as an asset, is to help create other opportunities in our financial lives, create liquidity, create investment opportunities. And it is a little bit counterintuitive to think this way, but it also can help build your credit score. What many people don't understand is that if you never use or access debt or maintain debt, it actually is harmful to your credit score. And there could be a time in our lives where we want to use or access our good credit rating, and we have to build that over time. So here's another way that debt becomes an asset if used smartly and using smart debt, is that we can build a good credit score. So these are just some various examples of how we use debt as an asset and using it smartly. Next slide, please, Ryan. So let's go into definitions. Definitions of smart debt. We've kind of talked about this. Smart debt can be backed by an appreciating asset. Okay, and this is helpful in the fact that what we're hoping for is that appreciation or savings and investing opportunities are outpacing the cost of the debt that we're holding. So in a mortgage against a house situation, we're hoping that using debt versus all of our cash, we're able to invest cash smartly, have it there so we don't go into and use dumb debt, but we also have an asset like a house that is appreciating. And not only are we paying down the debt, but our asset is appreciating. And therefore, if we, when we go to sell the house, we can easily pay off the debt. But what are some other areas? I mean, that's the most common area we tend to think about. I also like to challenge the thinking around extremely low interest rate debt against a tangible liquid asset. So, what could be an example here? Think about car loans. If you during certain periods of time, car loans become incredibly cheap, 0%, 0.9%, and these are often incentive based to get you to buy a car, but it can actually be used in a very smart way because it is backed by an asset, and that asset is liquid. Now, understand that the liquidity of the asset doesn't necessarily mean that the asset hasn't depreciated like a vehicle, but it can be used very smartly. I mean, if you have a car dealership offering you 0% interest and you need a new car, well, that is still debt, even though you're paying nothing for it. And that's extremely smart debt. It is basically cost-free debt. Here's another one that we should think about: student loan debt. Student loan debt is a huge, huge topic in the world today in terms of the federal government getting involved in loan forgiveness and helping people alleviate large amounts of student loan debt that they have taken on. I do think that a manageable level of student loan debt can be smart, and there is an analytical approach to this. What you want to think about is, if I go to school to get a degree and that degree helps me earn more money, there's got to be a certain cost to that, and there is a certain level of risk I can take by taking a loan to help pay for that for such schooling. And you can approach this very mathematically, very analytically. There is a lot of data out there. How much is the student loan going to cost you to pay back in totality, both principal and interest? And what's the earnings power that additional earnings power that is going to create by getting that degree program? And you can run financial analytics around present value of that stream of additional income against the total cost of student loan debt. And that can help guide you to understand how much student loan debt you should take. It shouldn't be 100% financing. Interest rates obviously need to be reasonable, but student loan debt is another area where it can be a very smart way to level up your future income. And if you run the analytics appropriately, it can be considered very smart debt. Now, there are probably other examples of these, but these are pretty common. And if we look at the definition of dumb debt, I mean, these are pretty straightforward and understandable. Next slide, Ryan. Dumb debt being personal loans, credit card debt. These are obvious, right? They're backed by just our ability to repay, and if we lose the ability to repay, then we are in big trouble. How about this one? Debt backed by an asset that exceeds a reasonable expected liquidation value of that asset. What's our scenario here? Well, this is the scenario where you buy the new car, you take a loan, a few years later you go buy another new car, but yet you have a balance left on your loan, and you roll forward that existing balance into the new loan on the new car. This is a very dumb approach to managing debt. So again, debt I think can be well managed. It can become an asset for you, and this is a little counterintuitive to common advice that is out there. I'll give you some other examples of using debt smartly. The question comes up: should I be paying off my mortgage before I retire? Well, the question becomes is how much liquidity have you established otherwise? How much do you have in investment accounts and retirement accounts? And again, it can help leverage a retirement by continuing on with smart debt versus dumb debt. Should I pay off personal loans and credit cards? Absolutely. The answer is yes. So let's move on to the second concept, which is around savings. Very common advice is to save and keep saving and cut your spending so you can save more. But here's the concept I'd really like to hone in on, which is start saving early. Whatever the initiative, whatever the timing is, yes, there is something, there is a certain amount that it has to do with how much you're saving, but timing really is key here. And what we're really drilling down to is the concept of compound earnings. The point of saving early means you get to capture earnings much sooner, and those earnings are going to work for you. Okay, it is what I believe one of the most powerful financial forces in the universe is compound earnings, and I'm not the only one. I didn't create this. Actually, next slide, Ryan. The famous Albert Einstein, the part-time physicist, actually understood compound interest very well. He had a quote that said, "Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it." So what is compound earnings? What is compound interest? Well, let's define that. Compounding or compound earnings is the phenomenon of earnings on earnings, meaning you will invest your own money, you'll get a return on that money, and you'll also get a return on those returns and returns on those returns. All the while you keep saving more money and get returns on those new funds invested and returns on those returns. So you can see how this can really exponentially help you and really level up your net worth and achievement of whatever your stated objective is if you get going early. But let's look at a mathematical example of this so we really understand what we're talking about here. And this isn't just great advice for the young adult just starting out in their professional lives and getting started with a saving. This is for any of us who have an initiative sitting out there that we want to achieve. It could be retirement, it could be the purchase of a home, it could be anything at all. It's get started saving earlier the better. So here's our first example. We're going to call this person the immediate saver. What they said is, I can get started today, but I can only get started with $2,400. And we said, this is a great idea. $200 a month, $2,400 a year. And he says, I can definitely save that for the next 5 years. And we said, fine, let's plan on that. Start saving for the next 5 years, $2,400 a year. And we think, whatever whatever the investment vehicle is, we're making an assumption that it's going to return 6%. Now, why is this important to lay out? It's good to understand not only the compounding, but again, the psychology around this. Once we sort of get in the practice of saving early and finding ways just to stash some monies away, it becomes much easier as time goes on to keep doing it, but also to level that up and find ways to do that. Now, there's balance in all of this and all of these things that we're talking about, right? There's balance in a discussion around smart debt and dumb debt. There's balance around timing of savings and how much we save and so on. And so that's very important. We'll come back to that later. But this person was able to start with $2,400, save it for the next 5 years. And you can see on this chart here, year one, they start with their $2,400. They earn a little bit of money on that. So they have something more than $2,400. The next year, they put another $2,400 in, and they've earned on their earnings, and they continue to earn on the $4,800 they invest. So that after year two, they are already north of $5,000. They continue making their contributions, and you can see that by the green bars, those contributions stay level. But the dark blue bars, those are our earnings. Those continue to go up a little bit each year, but our overall balance, the gray bars, goes up quite substantially because of our contributions and compound interest. Now, the phenomenon here that we're really honing in on is, look at when he stopped. This person stops at year 5, but our account continues to grow and reaches almost $20,000. So keep that in mind. Now let's go and look at scenario number 2. We're going to call this person our delayed and our enhanced saver. Now, this person says, well, I can't really get started today. I'm just getting on my feet, but in year 6, after 5 years, I will not only be able to save, but I'll be able to save more than the other person. I'll be able to save $3,000 a year and put that away then for the next 5 years. So same type of setup with our chart here. $3,000 remains stagnant over that 5-year period. Our earnings goes up and our account goes up close to $20,000 as well. But now let's compare these two on a side-by-side basis. So our immediate saver, if you took $2,400 a year times 5, they saved $12,000 of their own money. Our delayed and enhanced saver invested $15,000. But because of the beauty of saving early and capturing those compounding earnings on an earlier at an earlier time, our immediate saver reached after 10 years a level of just over $19,000, while our delayed and enhanced saver was just shy of $18,000. This is just a very small example of what we're talking about here. This applies in just about any case, that the earlier you start saving, the better off you're going to be earnings on earnings. And I'm telling you, the financial world and technology has made it so much easier for us to get started early and save small amounts of money. We can open up brokerage accounts, we can invest in mutual funds for small amounts of money. And the point here is, just start early. Okay, but we're going to come back to, it is about balance at some level. So that's point number 2. Point number 3, now we're talking about investing. Point number 3 that I would like to get across is investing with a purpose, and it is usually not about maximizing returns. I think social media, friends, neighbors, family, traditional media has programmed us to think in terms of maximizing returns. And we've lost the concept that in order to try to maximize returns, that can come with a great deal of risk. The investing world has only gotten more accessible, so it allows us to do this without even thinking. And what we really need to be doing is investing with a plan, with a purpose in mind, so it helps balance out our risk, balance out our portfolio, and really focus on trying to reach appropriate returns for the objective we're trying to achieve, adequate levels of returns, and it really helps us then limit our risk. So what do we mean by some of this? Well, let's first start by explaining this through some investment fables that are fairly common, talked about, or present it to us as advisors. We've had clients or others say that, hey, I'm retiring within the next few number of years and I need to get out of the stock market. Now, that would seem counterintuitive to what I was just saying about the reason that we need to focus on adequate returns versus the maximizing returns. This would seem to be a conservative move. But let's think about what retirement means. First of all, the definition of retirement has shifted from I'm just going to stop working and do nothing to people seeking second careers or hobbies as careers, things like that. But also, we're still finding that people have goals of retiring, at least from first career, at age 55 or 60, relatively young, when there are now expectations that we'll be living much longer. Average life expectancy still tends to be in the late 70s, early 80s, but there are expectations that that will continue to grow over time, and we will have more people living out to age 100. So when you think about retirement as a point in time, you can see that if I were to retire at 55 or 60, but expect to live to my late 70s, early 80s, or even out to 100, I still have a very long investment horizon ahead of me. So the idea that I should get out of the stock market doesn't really make a lot of sense now, and it presents a risk that my costs will inflate and outpace my level of earnings on the portfolio that I have to meet my retirement needs or my spending needs. So again, this is about matching returns and investment structure, investment approach with the need and what the need is in time horizon. Really, the whole purpose. All of that goes into your purpose. What about the next one? Here's one that we've heard before. Well, Warren Buffett's investment plan is to invest 90% in the S&P 500 and 10% in bonds. Well, I'm sorry to break the news to many of us. We are not Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's net worth starts with a B in terms of billions, and there aren't many of those out there. I am certainly not one, and therefore that would not be matching my investment plan, my investment structure with my purpose and my goals for my investments, right? Because this is Warren Buffett's plan. And in fact, that's not really his investment plan. What that came out of was his estate plan that directed future investment advisors for his wife to invest 90% of her inheritance in the S&P 500 and 10% in bonds. And that was because the 10% in bonds would yield enough in interest to support her cash flow needs. And we're talking about billions. So even just because Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors of all time, has this as a plan, it's not necessarily suitable to you. What is your purpose? And your purpose is made up of your investment horizon, your goals, your objectives, your plan, etc. Let's go on to the next investment fable that we may have all heard from our friends and neighbors. Well, I lost 50% last year, but I gained 50% this year, so I'm break even. Now, there's a couple issues with this, right? So very often what we tend to hear is people's success stories, not their failures. But this person decided to tell us their failure so that they could tell us their success or what they think is their success. If you're a mathematician or pretty good at math, you know that this person doesn't isn't really good at math, frankly, because if you lost 50% last year and then gained 50% this year, you're not break even. Let's run a simple example. If I had $100 and I invested it last year and I lost 50%, I'd have $50 left. I lost 50% of my $100. And then this year, if I gained 50%, I would not have my $100 because 50% of $50 is 25. I would only have $75. So simply saying that what you hear isn't always true. If you lose 50%, you actually have to gain 100% to be back to break even. And what we tend to focus on is in the maximize return world is we focus on the good years. We focus on, well, what did this recent year do versus what did last year do? And 2022 and 2023 are pretty good examples of that, where 2022 was a down year in the market, but then we like to talk about how 2023 started out with some recovery. Well, it's some recovery. It was some companies, some stocks, and it wasn't a full recovery back to where we were. So understand that the math doesn't work in this situation. If you lose 50%, you actually have to gain 100% to get back to break even. Goes back to risk. And then the last one, I have more money than I will ever spend, so I can afford the risk. I can afford to lose the money. Well, I can tell you that's not actually how psychology works, especially in the financial space. What I often ask clients as a general concept in retirement planning is, if I told you you have more money than you could possibly ever spend, in any scenario we develop for you, would you take risk with it? And sometimes that stumps people. But in this case, this person said, sure, no, I would take risk with it. And I asked the question, why? Why put anything at risk of loss? Because what will end up happening actually is ego will set in and you will not be able to stomach that loss if you did put it at substantial risk, and you'll take more risk trying to regain it. So the whole point is invest with a purpose. Create your plan, your investment horizon, your goals, your objective. All of that goes into defining your purpose and invest to that. Now, is that saying that you shouldn't have a play investment account? We have a lot of clients who like to take maybe a few $100s or a couple $1,000s and buy some, one-off technology stock or something that they heard about, or Bitcoin or something like that. That can certainly happen. This is about balance, as I said earlier. But when there is substantial money to be invested into your plan, stick to your plan, have regular reviews, have regular check-ins, such that the plan is still the plan you want, and the investment portfolio and the structure and the makeup is suitable to help you achieve that plan. So let's look at a little more information around this, because this has actually been studied for a long, long time. Is appropriate investments for appropriate returns for an appropriate level of risk. What you see here is a chart called the efficient frontier. Now, the efficient frontier was created back in 1952 by a gentleman by the name of Harry Markowitz. He was a Nobel Prize winner. And this is actually the cornerstone of modern portfolio theory. If you can see this chart, on the horizontal axis, you have expected returns. On the vertical axis, you have expected returns. On the horizontal, you have something called variance or risk. And we won't go into a lot of detail here, but at the most bottom point of this curve, you can see how the curve actually works backwards, and then it goes back to the right. The very lowest point of this curve is a 100% bond portfolio, and the furthest point up and to the right is 100% stocks. And what it does is it plots portfolios going from 100% bonds and adding in stocks all the way to 100% stocks. And you can see where balance is important, that you can actually reduce your risk and increase your return by creating balance. And creating this balance should be suitable, again, and tied to what your overall general purpose is. So this has been studied for a long, long time, but again, we've just started to begin to be programmed towards seeking what's going to give me the next highest return, what's the next best investment idea. So suitable returns, invest with a purpose. There's a great book out there that I recommend to a lot of people, and it is, I don't necessarily agree with everything that is in there, but this is one of the best books that ties psychology to money, written by Morgan Housel. He used to write for Morningstar, now he writes for the Collaborative Fund. This is a really good book if you're interested in understanding how psychology ties to financial decisions. There's a great quote that he put in there. It says, there is no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. And that goes back to the point of investing with a purpose. It's not about maximizing returns. It's about achieving a purpose and structuring your financial decisions, your investments, and so on with a purpose, because there is no need to take on additional risk if you don't need to. This is hard-earned monies and hard-earned lifestyle that you've worked very, very hard to achieve. So let's move on to our next one. Save more than you think. There's an advisor that I'm forgetting his name, but he had made a statement once that real risk lies beyond all that we can consider in our planning. And that really resonated with me, because we often think, well, we've got this great plan and we just got to save this specific amount of money, but there is so much out of our control that we can't consider or don't even know to consider. A lot of those things fall into the categories of like longer life expectancy, wanting more flexibility, or just unexpected things that come about in life. So when you can and have the opportunity to save more money, it is good to save. Now, understand and hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we need to cut our expenses, because as I keep reiterating, some of this is about balance. There is a happiness and a balance that will help us achieve success. I'm a big believer in discipline, but sometimes going for the $6 or $7 coffee at Starbucks or whatnot helps create actually more discipline down the road than it does by listening to someone say, don't waste your money on those and save the money instead. But always go in with a theme of if I can save a little more, I should try to save more, because there are things that I can't plan for, and there are certainly unexpected events. And Morgan Housel, again, has a great quote for this. He says, "The world is too complex to allow 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes." Now, how I digest this is that there is no way that we can assume that 100% of our actions will create 100% of our outcomes. The world is far too complex and unknown for that. And so saving more than we think will help alleviate some of that pressure for the unexpected circumstances that come up. And then the final point for today is really hitting home on the whole balance concept to these financial foundations. This is a quote, something that a mentor taught me years and years ago when working with clients, that we want to help them live for today but plan for tomorrow. So in all of these things that we've talked about today, they're very, some of them are common, some are a little more controversial, and we can get overly consumed with trying to optimize our situation, saving for the future. And we need to understand that the future is never promised, and we don't know what tomorrow really holds for us. So we should enjoy today a little bit and be okay with that. Going back to the, why do people fail at their New Year's resolutions of better health? That's because they become overly consumed with being so strict and not allowing themselves to slip up once in a while. It's no different really in our financial lives. One of the common questions we get as advisors, as an example, is, should I buy or lease my car? Well, with many of our clients, they're very successful in their lives and they've made great decisions in saving and investing. And I've said to clients, listen, if what you want in life, what makes you really happy, you're so disciplined in these other areas, but if what would really make you happy is a new car every 2 to 3 years, yes, leasing your car is not always a great decision. But if that's what's going to make you happy and allow you to create success in other ways, then go for it. If that's the worst financial decision you make, then so be it. But it is not the advice for the person who is riddled with credit card debt and personal loans and then leasing a brand new car every other year, couldn't afford to buy a house if they wanted to, and so on. So the advice is about balance and making sure that we do enjoy a little bit of the hard work that we're putting in. So let's summarize our 5 concepts and make sure that we understand what we're talking about. Again, these are just foundational and does not alleviate all complexity in our financial lives, and we still need to utilize professionals on our team to help us out. But it's okay to use debt as an asset as long as we're doing that smartly. We need to start saving for things as early as we possibly can, even if it's just a little bit. Just get into that practice of saving, and then find ways to invest more, save more than you think. Invest with a purpose. It's not about maximizing returns all the time, because trying to maximize returns can and will increase your risk. And then again, this is about balance. Live for today, plan for tomorrow. So if these are just the simple things that you can do on a day-to-day basis where you don't have to have meetings with your financial professionals and you're making decisions based on these, you'll probably be okay.